Okay, look, I had you read this novel, a part of the novel, Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and it focuses on this kid, Holden Caulfield, who is like privileged, right? Like he's like the MAGA hat kid on the news 2 years ago with the Native American drummer guy. Like he's got all the privileges, right? He's got them. He's at this fancy prep school out here in Pennsylvania. His parents live in a great apartment out in Manhattan. I mean, he's rich, right? He's got it all, like this kid, and he's miserable. Like he's totally unhappy. Okay, and he tells us right away, like in the beginning, right? Like kind of like why he's unhappy, although he hasn't like sort of like fully formulated it. But he's like, I had a lousy childhood, right? And my parents were really occupied. Like they didn't really pay a lot of attention to him. Okay, right? But you don't really want to hear about it because it's boring, right? Like it's not that I'm emotionally hurt. No, I'm just bored, right? I'm bored. So he can't really admit the emotional pain, but forget about it. Don't ask about it. And also, my parents would be really upset if they knew I was talking about that because that would make them look kind of bad. And they're nice, don't get me wrong, but like they really kind of touchy if you ever actually criticize them at all. So the point is, right, like it's like perfect family on the outside, but in like the inside, the real like family life is very dysfunctional, right? And the kid is really emotionally damaged, and he's trying to escape in this novel from this kind of toxic, oppressive culture that he's grown up in. He's trying to escape from these expectations of his parents, which are all built around worldly success, right? And from his peers who, or other people he encounters who are phonies, right? They're too obsessed with self-image and self-promotion. They're phonies. You can't really connect with them in an authentic human way, right? And Holden Caulfield's trying to escape from this in the novel, and the poor guy, I mean, like he it just gets worse and worse. And basically as he's trying to escape, he's having this adventure, he suffers a mental, emotional, nervous breakdown, right? He kind of loses touch with reality completely. And so the whole novel kind of represents the concerns that the psychologists and the sociologists have in the 1950s about these economic and social changes that they are witnessing. So we're not talking about sociologists and psychologists in the 70s looking back on the 50s. These are people in the 50s concerned about the changes they're witnessing, okay? And the thing they focus on most, the thing they're most worried about, is the suburbs. Okay, the suburbs are going to produce lots of little Holden Caulfields running around unhappy and running away from home because they're so discontent, right? The suburbs are so bad, right? Okay, look, well, what were they worried about was going to happen in the suburbs? Okay, well, two things in particular they were worried about. That there was going to be an increased sense of isolation among individuals living in the suburbs, and that people were going to be more conformist in the suburbs. Okay, so we'll deal with each one. Why are they worried? Why are these sociologists worried about isolationism? Okay, well, look, the people that are moving out to the suburbs, the mass migration of people to the suburbs, they're coming from cities, and a lot of times they're coming from these old, established neighborhoods with deep roots. So you had families living next to each other, growing up together over the course of several generations, right? So it's not just that you live in the same house with your grandparents and next door to your grandparents. You live next door to a family that your parents also live next door to growing up, right? Like your friends, your parents are also friends, and and the grandparents are friends. Everybody's friends. It's these families that have deep roots and deep ties together, right? It's beautiful. You go down the street to the drugstore to buy, like ice cream, and the druggist, and it's great. And he lives above the shop, and your father shoots pool with him, and then you go over down, and you're gonna get, you're gonna try to find a bike tire at the pawn shop because you need a new one, and the guy there, and his eldest daughter is taught you in school when you were a kid, and like everybody knows each other, right? And they go to church together, and it's an integrated, tight knit community, and the businesses are right next to the homes, and it's and this is kind of being romanticized a little bit by these sociologists, but the fear was that people were going to leave these old neighborhoods and they were going to be uprooted, right? And they weren't going to have those ties to the past and ties to family and friends the way they had. And they were going to go out to the suburbs where they didn't know anybody, okay? And you got to get in your enormous amphibious landing craft, multicolored Buick every morning and drive 10 miles into the city to work, okay, in a big, enormous office building with people who live in all sorts of different places, okay? And you only see them at work, you don't see them anywhere else, and they don't know your family. And then, you go home, and on the way home, you stop at the grocery store, which is 2 miles from your house, and it's owned by some rich guy out in Ohio, and you've got these people walking around in the store you've never seen before. Who are they? You don't know them, and you're picking up bread. No longer are you going down the streets to Canali family, who's been making bread in that same shop for 3 generations. No, you're going into the bread aisle, and all the processed bread looks exactly the same, and it's all wrapped up in the and it's just disgusting looking. And you go, and then you go to check it out. You don't know the person who's checking you out. You've never seen that. Who is she, right? Because it's not like here's the teenage kid working at the checking counter. Her father. Who are these people? You don't know anybody, right? Nobody knows anyone, right? It's all anonymous. That's the. So here we go. So so that's what they're afraid of. It's like total isolation, right? And it would be just like definitive of your experience in the suburbs. And then they're also worried about like conformity, right? Like you out in the suburbs, okay, look, every house looks just like every other house, right? Like they're all the same house, okay? And then all the cars are the same. And then like everybody, and like, look, you're kind of trying to live up to this ideal of what the good life is that's defined for you by the advertisers, right? Like the advertisers show the picture of the family in the car. That's what I have to be like. I have to look like that guy. I've got to have that suit. Man, and my wife needs to look like that. And, probably should just have 2 children. And look, that's what I got to live up to. These expectations that are being set for me by these advertisers away over here in New York. And I need to sort of measure my success and happiness in life by the things I'm able to buy, right? Like if I don't have that gray suit, man, I'm a loser. Or if I don't have that, I got to get a new multicolored amphibious landing craft, but a Chrysler this time next year. And then I gotta, boy, I better get into the country club. And in order to get into the country club, I need some new golf clubs. It's all about what am I able to buy, and living out this sort of like pattern of life, these ideals that are not defined by me and what my particular interests are, but by these business interests far away that are trying to sell me products. And in particular, where like this is gonna disrupt sort of local cultural diversity and subcultures, okay? To some extent there is the disruption of local subcultures. There is greater conformity on a bigger scale, thanks to the advertising and all that. But those little subcultures are more resilient than the psychologists gave them credit for, the sociologists gave them credit for, because well into the really nowadays even you've got the strength of say like Italian American identity. They love Frank Sinatra, and they're still going to drive into the old neighborhood on the weekends to buy bread from the Canalis because it tastes better, right? Like it doesn't obliterate local subculture in the way that the sociologists claimed it would. And so that's kind of the problem with the critique and the concerns of the sociologists and the psychologists was that they weren't actually like interviewing people that were moving out to the suburbs, right? Like they didn't go and talk to them, right? So the isolation issue, right? Well, first of all, like they're leaving the old neighborhoods for a reason, right? Like to them, they're getting ahead. They're moving on. They're moving up in the world, right? It's a sign of success. They're able to go out and have a little more space and some privacy, maybe for the first time, out in the suburbs. And new construction, modern conveniences, they were excited about it. There was a reason they were doing it. It wasn't like someone was forcing them to do it, right? Second of all, they're not necessarily just cutting off the past entirely. Like I said, they can go back in the weekends and buy bread from the Canalis and visit, the old church and everything. They can do that, right? They have the option now of going back and forth, right? Now there's certain consequences to it. Maybe it's a little less tight-knit and whatever, but they weighed their options. They made a decision, right? In terms of conformity, too, it's like, it doesn't matter what community you grow up in. You're always going to be faced with issues of conformity, right? Like, you have this whole group of people in the 1950s. They're a very small group, but they're called the Beats. They kind of very consciously try to reject the middle-class values around them, and they live in these little artist communes, and they pursue, they beat drums or whatever, and they wear, black clothing or whatever. Anyway, they're conforming to each other, right? Like there's a conformity thing happening there. But it's not conforming to the broader consumerist culture defined by the advertisers. All right. Now, so another, what's the point? Well, the point is these concerns are a little bit exaggerated, okay? But we're still left with this figure of Holden Caulfield. And I do think that there's a reason, the novel is still widely read, is because it lands. We have experienced many of the things that Holden Caulfield is experiencing, right? And there is something about the social context that's significant, right? The fact that he comes from this upper middle class family and he's dealing with this kind of new era of prosperity. He's coming of age about 1950 or so, and what is going on there, right? Well, I would say, look, yeah, some of it is a sociological problem because you do have rising prosperity and people moving up into the middle class, but really the main problem is like a kind of just like a perennial human problem, right? The more money I have, the more opportunities I have to sort of pursue my own desires and to pursue self-gratification, okay? And the more temptation, therefore, I have to kind of turn away from um, being fully present to those around me who need me, my family or my friends, right? And it becomes more about just myself and pleasing myself and gaining power than it is about sharing in an authentic way time with someone, right? Or doing something that's self-sacrificial, or receiving something from someone who wants to give me a gift, right? Like, you know, in other words, there's more opportunity to develop sort of patterns in your life that are built around serving yourself rather than serving others, and also receiving gifts from others and building a really authentic community, okay? So yeah, I think like the fact that Holden Caulfield's parents, they're more obsessed with making money than they are with spending time with their kids, that's a problem, right? And he's experiencing the fallout of that. And yeah, that has something to do with their wealth and status, but it also has something to do with just the perennial human nature. And then there's this question of a lot of people moving up into the middle class and into the upper middle class. And maybe they do get into the country club, okay? Well, they're new recruits to this whole like upper middle class thing, and they want to protect their status. So they are going to be a little bit more sensitive about reputation. They are going to be a little bit more sensitive about what people think about them, okay? Than maybe they would be if they were if they were still in the poor among the poor people, right? So yeah, I mean that has an impact, okay? And as you advance in social status and you become more ambitious, you're more and more concerned about how you are perceived by your peers, okay? And you're more and more concerned about proving to others that you should be accepted in this social class because of what you can buy and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's a real problem. I would also add that in our own culture, which is very prosperous, far more prosperous even than say that in the 1950s, and which is more explicitly built around self-gratification and immediate self-gratification. We got to be very careful about ourselves falling into these patterns that move us away from genuine human interaction and friendship and toward just sort of self-centered living, right? We got to be very careful about that because it has an impact not just on us, but on every single person around us, right? We're all going to do our best,